Hello, everyone. Thank you for dialing in today. My name is Vinal Menon, and I'm glad to be here talking to you today. I'm the CTO at CitiusTech, and I have been with CitiusTech for over 13 years now. I have been in this industry for over 20 years. Farooq, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Vinal. Hello, folks. My name is Farooq Mullah. I lead our product engineering capabilities at CitiusTech, which we call as enterprise applications. I've been with CitiusTech for over 5 years now, and in the industry for about 20 years. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Vinal.
Thank you, Farooq. So, folks, for today's talk, we will breeze through a short slide deck, and then Farooq and I will get into a Q&A session. And this session, for those who attended our previous session, will have certain elements which you may find a repeat. But our focus this time will be on the .NET technology stack. All right, so let's get started. Moving to Subhashri, you want to bring out the slides, please?
Yes, just a minute.
Sure. So we'll first take a quick look at the industry trends that are driving the demand for full stack. Then we'll look at how healthcare is adopting and the changes that are driving tech adoption in healthcare. And then we look at the .NET landscape in general. So yeah, Subhashri, let's move to slide number 3. Okay. So as all of you are aware and have been experiencing similar push in your industry, COVID has forced the entire tech space to invest more in technology. The key winner emerging out of this push is technologies around cloud. There is a strong demand for engineers who can do cloud, whether it is AWS, Azure, or Google. The other big trend that is in some ways accelerating innovation is faster velocity and time to market. So when everything becomes digital, a key differentiator for an organization is how fast it can put features in customers' hands. Third differentiator that is pushing the adoption of tech faster is the competitiveness. Imagine a team that is comprised of 3 engineers, say one for web, one for API, and one for the backend, and compare that with a team that's comprised of 3 full stack engineers. With all things being equal, which team do you think will be more competitive? It is going to be the full stack team, right? Because they are able to easily move across the stack, make the changes faster, and then bring it into the hands of the customer much earlier. The next big trend that is enabling adoption of cutting edge technology is the notion of global scalability today. Gone are the days when companies had to think local and be constrained to where their physical points of presence were. Because the thinking today is everything is digital, then why restrict your business to only areas where you have a physical presence? And interestingly, this scalability needs newer architectures and teams of engineers who are conversant with those notions. Lastly, a strong force that is driving changes in technology is security and compliance. Again, with everything being digital, security takes on a much more important role. Here again, a full stack engineer who understands the stack will be able to, for example, implement, say, we take the case of encryption. Now, instead of it being 3 distinct notions of encryption, which may be needed in some use cases, 3 people, different team members implementing encryption differently. This is one particular person who's able to traverse up the stack and ensure that, for example, encryption is appropriately implemented. So moving on to slide number 4. So in this slide, let me share with you how COVID has accelerated the adoption of tech in healthcare. So healthcare is rapidly moving towards digital experiences, whether it be Internet of Things or personal sensors or chatbots. There's quite a bit of demand to bring more immersive and integrated experience to the users. And the spectrum of users include both care providers as well as patients. We can think of remote patient monitoring as a new use case that has emerged. The use case has existed. It has become more pertinent in COVID times. So given the risk that, for example, a physician, a doctor, or a care provider carries, and the shortage of care providers, it makes sense to go hammer and tongs on implementing remote patient monitoring. So care is becoming virtual as we know it. Collaboration use cases, and again, considering the care team, the likes of what we see with the tech world is used to a Slack or a Microsoft Teams. We have our chat windows and we have our virtual communication. That is being adopted in healthcare in a big way and in interesting ways as well. So today there are organizations that are looking at having a drone-based monitoring and integrating that drone into a chat interface. So new and improved use cases. Lastly, there is data and integrated machine learning, which are in some ways driving the creation of data sources. The data has existed. We are now paying more attention to it. So we call them those as signals, and we are taking those signals to form uh, intelligent insights, and then changing care as it is delivered based on those insights. So in short, healthcare is making significant investments and adopting latest and greatest in tech. And we may have an opportunity to touch upon this a bit later. So moving to the next slide, I would want to invite Farooq to speak about how the .NET landscape has been embracing this. So Farooq? Farooq, are you
I,
there?
I, I just happened to kind of mute myself actually because I was just on. So the .NET landscape has actually changed quite a bit in the sense that if as you know that about 10 years back or perhaps 5 years back, had you seen Microsoft, it would have had a very enterprise kind of a model of delivering and coming up with languages. But now what's it become? It's become a very open and more a collaborative stream where a lot of their technologies have become open source. For example, Microsoft .NET Core has become open source. They have actually invested into TypeScript. They are investing into Rust is what is the next thing that they're actually getting invested into. So the entire landscape, if you look at it right from the front end to the middle tier, which is the service tier, or the back end, everything has kind of progressed and is going in touch with, or rather, they're going hand in hand in one where the open source is kind of going to. So if you look at the front end technology alone, the leaders, of course, are the React and the Angular of the world. Vue is actually catching up with 15% of the world coming onto Vue. But what we have seen over the last 7-8 years, especially with TypeScript coming in, a lot of the backend developers who generally were not very comfortable with front end, they actually came to the fore and they started building it out. And thanks to the bot frameworks and PWA, we have, not PWA, of course, chatbots have become a very common thing in the last, I would say, 5 years. Building a chatbot is a very trivial matter in these days. So you just have to you set up the right intent and you can build it out. So the front end has actually changed a lot, and you'll see the good part is now that you build it once in one location and you can actually and render it on multiple forms. That's the biggest aspect of it. From the service tier perspective, of course, where we have ASP.NET and MVC core coming into play, which basically means that not only your applications work on traditionally Windows, now it can actually work on Linux, and there's no barrier as such, which used to be the case in the past. So they kind of broken the walls. That's what Microsoft has done so far. And there's a lot of other things in terms of the real-time streaming where they have Signal and Socket.io. And Signal is almost at the end of its life, actually, in some ways. But the interesting thing has been around the backend databases. For example, you might have seen Cosmos DB, which comes with Azure, which is a multi-model database, which not only supports your standard RDBMS, but also supports NoSQL in the form of document DB, key store, and you name it. So the world has been very embracing to all the different technologies out there. So when we talk about Microsoft technology, it's not only about .NET now. We also talk about .NET. We talk about microservices. We talk about C#. We talk about EF Core. We talk about GraphQL. We talk about Ocelot, Docker, Kubernetes, Azure. You name it, it's out there now. So it's a very, very healthy ecosystem which has come up. So yeah, with that, I'll pass it back to you, Will.
So Thank you, Farooq. And that covers a pretty broad spectrum. And if you look at it, we have mentioned some of these tech on the left, and then some of the concepts and capabilities that a full stack developer would need to understand. So it's quite an imposing list. And I would like to quote a wise person named Desmond Tutu, who once said, "To eat an elephant, you do it one bite at a time." So in this case, your journey of understanding all these technologies must begin with first the concepts. In your mental model, place the concept, understand what is it solving, and what are the drivers for that concept. Why did this concept become popular right now? What are the key problems it is solving? How were the problems solved previously? And then as you gain an understanding of the problem, then you start looking at the libraries, the popular libraries that implement or solve the concept for you. How does it take in? What are the inputs it takes? How does it return the outputs? And then what is the notion of plumbing that you should have? And then are there any frameworks that are built around those libraries? And then eventually what tends to happen with an open system like .NET is language capability comes in. So a lot of libraries or a lot of concepts that began in libraries today are available as part of the framework classes or sometimes even a base class library. So understanding how that concept has gotten absorbed into the language model itself. An interesting concept that we emphasize for a lot of our teams here at CitiusTech is you should have a daily kata, which is a practice of basic concepts that you do on a daily basis to improve your proficiency with that particular concept. You should focus on ASP.NET, .NET Core, and entity framework. And then you continue focusing on building those capabilities and ensuring a solid foundation. Then if you look at it as a ring model, then you expand your ring to include distributed computing. Today, notions of API gateways, service mesh, as Farooq alluded to, streaming endpoints, those become very critical. What are the common libraries? How do you invoke those libraries? Then you get into more distributed computing, understanding how that extends into the data domain. What is the CAP theorem? How do cloud databases provide global scalability? What is the security model over there? How does it impact performance? Cost is a key aspect. And then you expand into the infrastructure domain where Docker, Kubernetes, Helm, Graal VM, all of those become critical over there. You look at serverless computing. And this itself is a solid journey. And as Farooq touched upon, then you can look at the interaction aspects, whether it is on the mobile, whether you're going towards IoT, whether you're leaning towards sensor and edge networks, or you stick to the traditional human tier where you have humans interacting with chatbots, you have mobile interfaces. There again, Farooq touched upon PWAs and how .NET has an offering around, Microsoft has an offering, Xamarin, around those interfaces. And then as you tackle the stack, start with your area of strength, whether it is front end, back end, or middle tier. And then build first deep capabilities and then start building sideways capabilities. And as we have mentioned over here, there are other capabilities which are critical to your success because software is a team game. And you need to understand processes of being efficient in a team. That includes understanding Git workflows. What are the notions around cross-cutting concerns, including security, performance, etc. And then familiarity with underlying internet technologies, HTTPS, TLS, Unicode. Those will differentiate you from most of the other engineers out there. So let's move on to slide number 6. And we wanted to leave you with some meta links or links to links for you to dig deeper. In fact, we are in the process of building out a longer list of resources. And if you want a sneak peek at that, drop us an email on the mail mentioned over there. We will soon be sharing it on our blog as well. And yeah, so with that, we are at the end of our presentation section. Let's move on to the Q&A section. Farooq, is there anything you would want to add?
No, I think you've covered everything there, Vinil. So coming
Thank
to the
you.
Q&A section, this is my favorite part where I get to question Vinil. So Vinil, as you know, we've been hearing full stack for a long time, and let me start with a very basic question. What would you define a full stack developer as?
Yeah, it's a often used term these days. So the term full stack originates from the typical stack diagram used to depict software architecture. So when the web took off, the original stack had three tiers: the front end or the UI, the middle tier or the services, and the back end or database tier. And over the years, as development complexity increased, the tiers themselves, the boundaries between the tiers started becoming fuzzy. It started extending horizontally as well as increasing in number vertically. And with the arrival of cloud and infrastructure as code, the the notion of a tier itself is now becoming meta tiers. So although we could call a person who can write some HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and a service, say in ASP.NET, who invokes a SQL Server database as a full stack developer, today, as in the industry, expects a bit more when we talk about full stack. So we expect the person to be familiar with one of the big three front end frameworks, one of the top three cloud vendors, and an understanding of, say, unit testing and mocking, to say the least.
Right. In fact, Vinil, I would also add Docker and containers into that. No, not Docker,
Oh,
containers.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, Vinil, coming to, so we've seen technology adoption in healthcare industry actually rising over the last few years as well, and especially post-COVID, as you mentioned. We have seen that a lot. Do you have any thoughts on how do we see this new crop of technology being adopted in healthcare?
Sure. So as I mentioned, over the last 1 year, investments in healthcare have increased significantly to adopt newer technology. So let me talk about a few use cases. Let's look at, say, Internet of Things. And when it comes to healthcare, people call it Internet of Medical Things, Internet of Healthy Things, etc. But we'll stick to IoT. So IoT is being adopted majorly in healthcare, whether it be wearable devices, popular examples being wristbands or watches, to implantables like, say, a pacemaker that has the ability to connect to a, say, a localized mesh network, or a dialysis machine, or even prosthetic limbs that can be reprogrammed dynamically. As for example, as a person ages, the limb can take on characteristics of the age. And there are even socks available today to prevent what is called deep vein thrombosis that sends out information from there. Another tech that is rising in adoption is augmented reality. So imagine someone is getting, say, a shoulder surgery, and a joint is being introduced in the shoulder. And today, with the AR, augmented reality, on an iPad or a mobile screen, the prior to the surgery, we can show the patient that this is the new range of motion they will gain post the surgery. Or if there are a variety of implants that can be added or joints that can be introduced, then you can compare and contrast the types of joints. Or with augmented reality, so there was an app that had become quite popular that could actually age people. But another use case is you could actually look at, say, cosmetic options that could, for example, show you how your aging will proceed, and then what is it that can be done, whether it is through appropriate interventions that you can uh, prevent or stanch the aging process cosmetically. Another big area is 3D printing, where there is significant innovation happening from materials, as in uh, soon tissue printing would be more commonly available. So not just tissues, but even harder materials. Harder materials have been available for some time. But with these multi-modal material combination printers that are able to bring together these modes and materials, the the ability for a 3D printed part, whether it be part of a prosthetic limb or even an aid in surgery, So knowing how to approach, say for example, in the thoracic area, how do you want to approach a particular surgery with a 3D printed model of various organs or even the bone structure? That helps surgeons make a better call. Oftentimes, instead of them visualizing in their head or seeing it on a 2D screen, now with the 3D printed module in their hand, they can actually review it from variety of angles, lighting conditions, etc. And then, of course, machine learning is impacting all aspects, whether it be efficiency and optimization. To an area that hits closer to home is the vaccine and the drug discovery process. So
Right.
not just in predicting the attachment points within a cellular structure or in the nucleus, but running those simulations parallelly on the cloud. With cloud today, we have the ability to spawn thousands of machines and then run all of those simulations in parallel. So what would take sequentially, if run, what would take, say, months, today can be executed in days. Uh, the simulations can be executed in days. So amazing investments happening in healthcare.
Sure. Thanks, Vinod, for that. So coming to one of the technologies which I think a lot of the audience associate themselves with is Microsoft technologies, .NET and associated tech. We've seen quite a few changes happen in the last few years, kind of we alluded to earlier. But how do you think it will evolve further in future?
Yeah, so as we were discussing right before the call, as in the
Yeah.
recent Build conference was a fantastic uh, gave a fantastic insight into the kind of tech they are bringing to the hands of developers.
Right.
And with Copilot and other such features coming, it's an interesting time to be a .NET developer. So .NET has been a strong transformative force in the industry. For nearly 21 years now, .NET has been stewarding the needs of the enterprise and combining that with the gradual adoption of programmer-friendly technologies, whether it be generics way back in 2005, or bringing in functional constructs, bringing in language integrated query, making entity framework a more cohesive part of the development process, and then of course becoming completely open source. Does a lot of what we do today has its either ideation or genesis in the way .NET did stuff. And today, Microsoft Stack exists on uh, your desktop, but also on devices, on the edge, on the cloud, in the browser, on the mobile. So I think, and with them bringing in more AI engineering capabilities, and on the IoT side, they're calling it a metaverse. Those capabilities coming in, I would like to reiterate that it's an exciting time to be a .NET developer.
Absolutely. So coming on to the next area of the front end technologies, which is JavaScript, it's seen a plethora of languages, over many years. So what are your recommendations in terms of the frameworks and the patterns and the principles that the developers should focus upon?
So you did touch upon this, Farooq, that the
Yes, I
top
did.
three frameworks today are React, Angular, and Vue. And then there are ancillary libraries that go along with those frameworks, whether it be around server-side rendering or on how to manage routing intelligently or how to do reactive programming. One thing that we were discussing as well, that the basics. So as the browser cycle has changed. Today we don't even upgrade browsers. It happens
Right.
behind the scenes, and a lot of these features which were previously framework only are now coming into the browser themselves.
Right.
So one thing I would want to emphasize is learn the basics. There is constant upgradation happening to JavaScript as a language, and stick to the latest and then use a transpiler like a Babel
Mm.
to support older versions of the browsers.
All right. The last question which I had in mind is basically So with your years of experience, what would you advise our young developers so that they can prepare themselves to ride and command this technology wave that's coming to them?
So the first one I would say is curiosity. Energy comes from curiosity, and then
Right.
that will help you be excited, wake up excited every morning, and stick to the journey. This is not a destination, and this requires focus and discipline. There are plenty of resources online, and my only guidance there would be complete one before picking up another, and keep a pen and paper handy. Identify the things that you find distinct, different, or doesn't align well, or you think you have understood, but you may not have understood the nitty-gritties. And it's one step, one day at a time. Keep on practicing the basics. And there are technologies which are ignored, for example, CSS or security, performance, Git, pull requests, debugging, logging, instrumentation. Those are aspects that differentiate you from just being a basic engineer to a much more appreciated and respected engineer. Farooq, what are your thoughts over there?
You kind of mentioned it in the first line itself. It's about learning and curiosity. I definitely believe in that. So it's for everyone out there. That if you're curious, you'll find the changes to be much more interesting to learn about. So learn out of curiosity, and don't learn out of fear or peer pressure. That's what happens many times. That when you hear a friend talking about language X, language Y, my suggestion is again what kind of which what Vinny spoke about is try to go deep with at least one or two technologies deep into that, because after that everything will be delta. It'll be just be doing comparison when you start learning things. So learn one skill very well, and as Vinny mentioned, learn it out of curiosity, because the moment you try to put a peer pressure or fear in your minds, that learning becomes a struggle after that. So yeah, that's all I had to add to that point.
Great.
Okay.
And thank you for sharing that insights, Farooq. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for it. So I think we are almost at the end of our time. We just have about a minute left. So I'll pass it back to Subhashri.
So this has been a really great session. Thank you, Vinila and Farooq, for really such an enlightening session. I'm sure everybody here who are here with us have thoroughly enjoyed it and also benefited from it. We hope you like the series, and our upcoming webinars are also here, which are lined up. So there are some interesting topics here which are lined up. So we hope that you guys are going to join us for the upcoming webinars as well. If you wish to enroll for the webinars or write to us, or you have any questions to ask or any feedback to share, you can definitely write to us at awesome@serioustech.com.
I'll just add one line to the Subhashri. So if you are interested, look us up on LinkedIn, and if you have any questions, do reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer anything that you want.
Yes.
Okay. Back to you, Subhashri.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for
have a
joining.
great weekend.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.